there's too many factors that make it none other than a poltergeist.
Oh, wow. You're lucky it wasn't, one that, could have been, not
throw knives at me?
Yeah, one that wasn't friendly, one, like I worked in a place back in the 90s to probably about 2004. I managed a fairly large business, and it was a retail operation. We had a couple different stores. But we had a huge basement, and the building we were in was originally a hotel built in around 1860s in Tacoma, Washington, right on the waterfront where all the ships would come in. And originally it was a hotel. The upstairs, I hate to say it, around the 1880s to around the 1920s was a brothel.
I knew you were going to say that.
And the basement where we had our storage used to be a bar in the 1800s up to, I think, about 1920. It was a speakeasy. And I had all these employees. And I mean, like I was telling the people on the show here, last week, some of the employees I had was like an ex-Army Ranger. I had an ex-Navy SEAL. I had a chief bosun mate from, the Navy on submarine, all reliable people. And they would go down in the basement to bring stock up. And they would tell me the place was haunted. Even the owner of the business told me that the basement was haunted, and he'd hardly ever go down there. But, I didn't believe it. I figured, hey, imagination, right? But during this course of like 16 years, there was a lot of employees we had. And a lot of them, they didn't know each other because, they come and go. And people come up and tell me, hey, Gary, this place is haunted. I watched something move by itself, or I, seen something just fall off the shelf for no reason, which the type of shelf is, it would have been impossible to fall off. It would have had to lift up and then come over and drop. And I kind of like figured, hey, all these people were strange. And then years and years later, because, being the general manager, I very seldom ever had to go down the basement to get any merchandise. That wasn't my job. I went down there. And I smelled lilac. And it was a dingy, not very well lit basement. And it was huge, and it actually went under the main street in Tacoma, downtown Tacoma. Because that's how old the building was. And I was walking down there, and all of a sudden it got really cold, and I smelled lilac, really strong. And I walked another couple feet, and hey, the temperature came back up. I didn't smell lilac anymore. And I thought that was strange. If anything, I thought I would smell the sewer, from being down in the basement.
Right.
Then
there was something down there with you.
Yeah. Then a while later, a couple other things happened. I was down in the basement. I was the only one down there because it was, again, a large thing. You had to go down aisles to get the merchandise, and these aisles were like a couple 100 feet long. I was walking, and somebody tapped me hard on the shoulder blade, and it really hurt. I turned around. I was really upset. I was probably close to wanting to punch somebody, that type of turnaround. Nobody there. Absolutely nobody. That kind of got my nervousness up. And there was times I had to work late because I also did repair of, photography equipment. And what the other technician couldn't do, I would come in and work on stuff late at night. And I'd be there at like 11, 12 o'clock at night. And to go upstairs, because the offices were upstairs, there's like leftover from the hotel years, a big, huge staircase. I would hear people walking up the staircase. Not one or two, it'd be like 3 or 4 people. And you'd hear muffled talking. And I would run out there thinking, gee, the owners are there. Well, I walk out there, and there's nobody there. I go to the main door. It's double bolted from the inside, so there's no way they could have got in anyway. This happened like 2, 3 times, and you know what? I never went in there. When we closed at 6 o'clock, I was out at 6 o'clock after that. That was enough to convince me that there are spirits and there's ghosts. And unless you have ever experienced it, you don't know what it feels like.
Yeah. No.
Scary.
I hear you. Yeah, it is. It is. And the biggest thing I think about ghosts is, um, especially if you're working and doing investigations and you're in the dark, because you might hear footsteps come up on you. And I know that the footsteps are residual energy, so I'm never really thinking actually somebody's going to run up on me and bump into me. But just hearing that come and being in the dark, and you know, you're heightened, your senses are so much more heightened, and then you're on edge, and then you hear these things and you're in the dark and you just don't know what's in that dark with you.
Yeah. I've talked to people. They actually said they ran into ghosts and where they were friendly and all this stuff. But then I've also talked to people where they said that the ghosts were unfriendly and physical.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole different. The entities are broken down into what's a spirit, which is a human person that has been living and then dies. That's a spirit. Then there's a ghost, which is a deceased human being. However, they didn't cross over and become a spirit, so they're stuck here, even though their body has disappeared. They still have sort of an outline of a body, and that's when you see the apparitions. And those are generally friendly unless they're very protective of their surroundings, or that's when you get that type of interaction. And then there's the demonic, which were never living in the first place, and those are a whole different type of entity. Yeah. So those tend to be like the obviously the worst personalities and the most aggressive.
What can you explain to some of the people what the difference is actually? I mean, are they the ones that can get actually physical and hurt you and brainwash you and all that stuff?
Those are the ones that get into. They're attracted to people that have low vibration, and by low vibration I mean drug addictions. They're vulnerable mentally. Maybe they've got mental issues, depression, suicidal, drug use. They tend to linger with those because they're more open to being vulnerable, and then that way they can get in. Oh, wow. And then what happens is the first stage is attachment, where they will attach onto you and follow you home. Then they work on oppression, which is starting to take over the energy in the house. People start fighting. People start getting sick a lot. And then the final, once they've worn everyone down to that point, is that they possess the person and take over their mind. And so a lot of these, crazy, I don't want to get into it, but, kids that shoot up schools, all these mass murderers, murder things that happen are usually because they were under some sort of possession and being told to do things.
Yeah, they're brainwashed into
exactly.
Yeah,
they need that weak person that they can take over their mind, because they need a body to take over. Remember, these things have no body, so they need to jump into somebody that they can take over, and that's the worst case, and that's when you need to call in and get an exorcist and do an exorcism. Being psychic, I deal with all sorts of clients, and some of them are starting to have the dark energy around them. And if I can get to them beforehand and turn them around and heal them before it gets worse, then I win. Which, of course, that side doesn't like, because I'm fighting for the good guys now. And I was under demonic attack several years ago myself, because they knew that I was on the good side and from the light and trying to help and save humans, and that got the attention of the dark side. And then, unfortunately, I had my own dealings to deal with. Luckily, with the help of a preacher, I was able to conquer all that and then protect myself enough. But it got pretty nasty for many, many months, and I was under attack, and I woke up with scratches all over me, and it got really, really ugly. So I know firsthand what can happen. So I try to educate and warn people and keep people in the light so that this doesn't happen to them, because then it becomes a huge ordeal to deal with.
Yeah, I known a girl in the family that would wake up with cuts on her arms, legs, and face, like razor cuts. And,
Yeah.
the funny thing is that, she actually stayed at my place for a little while. We thought maybe she had problems at home, but it was happening here. And then when this would happen, I made a point. There was no razor blades around the house at all. I made sure of that, because I, at that time had a beard and I didn't shave anyway. But it just got scary, and it was happening, for a long period of time. And she went from being a real sweet girl to, I hate to say it, the biggest bee you could ever run into.
Right.
And her whole personality changed from being sweet, innocent, to, angry, violent. And, and then actually towards the end, she was even actually after the cutting started, when she was sleeping at night, and bruises, then she actually started cutting herself. She went into the stage after that where she started cutting herself. Have you ever run across anything like that?
Well, that again would be the dark side there, trying to, control her, make her do that. When some of these entities break down the humans, it starts looking also, they do it in a way that makes the person look like they're crazy so they can get away with it. It's hidden in human behavior so that it's easiest to write it off as like, oh, that person's insane, that person's crazy. Like homeless people. I think a lot of those people are possessed as well. I'm not saying everyone, but those... My headset just fell out.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh my God.
I was hoping we didn't lose you.
No. So behavior like that, where they're walking around talking to themselves in their own mind, a lot of these spirits are able to just take over the mind. Once they get the mind, then they've got a body and a vehicle to work in. But the main thing, their main goal is to work on the person's emotions. So it gets written down as, psychotic behavior, depression, suicidal. That way it's hidden and they can go unnoticed by just hiding under these, mental illnesses.
Oh, yeah. I really think a lot of the serial killers like Ed Bundy and Manson, all that stuff were,
Exactly.
actually possessed. And unless it's happening to you, I mean, the average person is going to think you're crazy. But,
Right.
but if you get in a situation where they come in and possess you, even if you know that you're being possessed, because I think at the start, somebody knows, or I think from the couple of people I've talked to, they actually told me they felt like somebody was trying to possess them. And then all of a sudden they got possessed, and I think they were fighting to take control, and they lost. I mean, the people lost.
Right.
Yeah.
No. And that's the thing, because you start not feeling yourself, and you start feeling really down, and that's that darkness creeping in, and that's what I'm talking about, the vibration. These creatures are very low vibration and seek the same. So if we stay in the light and we stay full of compassion and love and spirituality, we stay high vibrational, which in that case they have no interest in you, which is what happened to me. I started becoming so of the light that they lost interest in me. In fact, I became repulsive to them because I was too much full of love and compassion, and they would rather go and find someone that's easier to get into than someone that's going to fight, and it took so much fighting to get my strength back, because they had broken me down so much that I had almost given up and I was ready to kill myself.
Oh, wow.
But, and that's why I know firsthand how serious this can be. So once the preacher helped me and believed in me and fought for me, I started getting my own strength back, and that's when I started fighting and having a voice again. And that's when, after months and months, probably it was a 5-month struggle, and then it started up again in another house after I moved. But I remember the day that I just felt everything literally slither away, and my house filled with light, and it felt so much lighter, and then that was the end of it.
Question: do you think maybe where you lived at, that could have been the problem, and they were at that location, and you happened to move in, and they realized that they could, come in and try to